Chris Burkard. I'm an adventure photographer. I'm from Pismo Beach, California, and I'm 31 years old. I've been shooting for probably about a decade. So I grew up in this tiny little beach town, right? I mean, it's probably more known for its clam chowder than great waves or anything like that. And I guess my journey to photography was really just the desire to get out of that small town and see the rest of the world. I didn't have a passport when I grew up, never traveled, came from a single parent home, and I was just basically eager to know the world outside of the 6 o'clock news or the dinner table. So I knew that photography could potentially be this, passport to see everything I've always wanted to see. And when I picked it up, that was really it. I knew I was like, I'm gonna give everything I can to this craft. I'm gonna do whatever I can. I don't care if I'm shooting weddings for the rest of my life or portraits or just whatever. Like, I just want to be able to, make a living using a camera. And so it eventually, years and years of trying to, make it work. It took some time. I've started slowly but surely kind of make a career out of it. I think the perception of what my average day is probably a lot cooler than my average day. Usually my days start with my kids waking me up in bed, and then it's, just dad time for a couple hours, and I go to work and I sit behind a computer and I write emails and try to surf or do yoga or somehow in between. But basically when I'm home, I'm usually preparing for something. I'm going somewhere else, and a job or an assignment or whatever that might be. And oftentimes when I do go on those assignments, the days can be really interesting. It can vary. There's jobs that hang me off the edge of a cliff somewhere. Next week I'm going to a remote fjord in the northwest part of Iceland to teach a workshop for 7 days near the Arctic. So it can really vary. I find that for me that the projects and the jobs that make me feel the most inspired are the ones where I'm truly able to share wild places with people. Those are the experiences that mean a lot to me. And so I find that anytime there's cold water, empty beaches, just open landscape, really, that's I feel like when my best work comes through. I learned a long time ago that you're not really doing yourself any favors being decent at everything. It's better to truly know and be the best you can at one thing. And when you really hone your skills and you specialize in that, that's what you're sought after for. You're sought after for your talents and kind of what you bring to the table. And so for me, I knew that landscapes is what I understood and knew the best. And I kind of sought that out. I sought out the opportunity to shoot in a lot of these remote and wild places. And I think that what I realized was that what I was bringing to the table was this body of work that was different and unique. And I had sought out the places that others had kind of written off as too cold and remote and dangerous. And that's really what I think I cut my teeth on. I've shot a lot of other places, but I don't think that my work is really known for that. And I guess, when I try to think of a signature style, I love it when the subject is small and they're really dwarfed by the landscape around them. I love when my subject is relatable and you can in some way feel like you can put yourself in that position. I try to do that by limiting the amount of logos and stuff in the shot that kind of takes your attention away. And also I love a timeless image. A photograph that could be 1967 or 2017, you have no idea. So easily my favorite photograph is this photo we shot in the Aleutian Islands, and it's a gorgeous photo, I think. But it's this photo of this volcano just coming out over the tundra, and there's waves in the foreground, and there's this bird and this guy doing this big turn, but it's more about what it represents. Like, when you have someone tell you that this place is a wasteland, you're not going to find anything, nobody believes in you, and you plan years and years to go somewhere, and then you ultimately get there and you see just the beauty that's there, and you realize that it's kind of your job to change those opinions and share it. That's so meaningful. And I feel like I always look for that one photo that kind of summarizes the entire experience. And when you get that, it's so valuable. It's like that's the thing, that's the one thing that you're able to walk away with. It's so cool. It's like a amazing gift, So I guess for me, that's really truly what the one photo that I think about the most whenever I think about was it worth it, And it's the one that oftentimes when people bring up my work, that's what they remember. If I wasn't a photographer, I thought about this a little bit. I think I would want to be a geologist. I don't know why, but I love rocks, and I love to understand how places were shaped. You know, when you go to these locations, you see these deep granite fjords. You know, you always want to know like what moved through here to cut this out. You know, you go to places like Yosemite and Joshua Tree and the parks that I kind of grew up in, and I'm just always intrigued to kind of know and understand that. And I don't know. I feel like every time you pick up a rock, it's like there's like a history lesson there, and I've just always valued that. You know, I've picked them up everywhere I've gone, and just appreciated them, and I think that's a really cool thing to think about, I guess, for me. You know, maybe another lifetime, I don't know. Yeah, so the film Under an Arctic Sky was basically, well, to be honest, it never really was planned. You know, we went there with the intentions of basically shooting this surf trip for a magazine. I was there working on assignment, and I brought a cinematographer along, a good friend of mine, Ben, and we were planning on shooting this surf trip to this remote fjord to find waves that we had been searching for years. Finally got the opportunity to go there from this amazing captain that lived there in the wintertime. So it was definitely a dangerous time of year, very risky. But we were excited to share that journey. And when we got there, the largest storm in 25 years descended upon us. And the film evolved at that point. It really became about the relationships that you forge in these wild places and the importance of them when you start to rely on people for not only a great experience, but for your life, you know, and that's, I don't want to give away too much, but essentially that's kind of the you know, how the film sort of came together, and we never planned for any of it, you know, we never planned for it to end how it did, for what took place to happen, but there were times that I've never been more afraid in my entire life, and there were times where I've never experienced greater joy. Everything we do is calculated risks. You know, that's the key thing when you do have people who are relying on you back home. I would never go to Iceland with somebody who I'd never been with before or had never surfed in cold water. Luckily, when we made those decisions to kind of push through, we were making them because we were with people that had been on these roads before, and we trusted them, and they felt secure doing it. Now, sometimes bad things happen, and you get in situations where it becomes a lot worse than you expected. That storm we put ourselves in was a lot worse than we realized, and anybody realized. Nobody knew it was going to be that big and that severe and that dangerous. And so we ultimately kind of just were forced into that position. But I'll tell you what, the beauty of the whole thing is that for me at least, the reason that I feel and work so hard in these places, because I know that I have a family back home, and I guess the work that I do, they depend on, and it's kind of a catch-22, you know, where I've built a career in these places, and I never want to pass on some inherent fear of the unknown to my kids like so many adults have today. And so I always want to urge them to you know, take risks when calculated and when needed, because I think that, like this film will show you when you see it, Mother Nature had a plan, and we ended up exactly where we needed to be. If I was to start all over again, I think that the most important thing I would do is in the beginning of my career, I traveled a lot for other people, for editors and people that I was going to places that I knew they wanted me to go to, the safe places, the places that were easy, and I knew I'd get what I needed to do, but they weren't advancing myself or my career or my mission in any way, you know. And I guess I realized looking back that none of that work means anything to me. And so when I started traveling to the places that was meaningful to me, and purposeful in some way, that's when the work started to become significant. And I look back at that, and I'm grateful, because those are the trips that I really value. And I guess I would just urge anybody, you know, in this career to make sure that what you're doing has a purpose, and that you've defined that, you figured that out. And also, the best piece of advice I can offer is just don't describe to people what they can already see. We have eyes, and we have to use them to enjoy media, films and books and social media. What we need to do as a culture is learn how to tell better stories. And it's a hard thing at first to put yourself and be vulnerable and share your own thoughts. But to create something beautiful and just tell me that the mountains are calling and you must go, that's just using somebody else's words, as opposed to telling me what it felt like when you stood there and created this, and you felt the wind on your face and the snow crunch beneath your feet and the visceral experience of smelling and feeling this location. And so I think that we can all do a better job at telling better stories. I know I can, and that's really the piece of advice that I wish I would have honed in on earlier in my life.